Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Mark Ostrander is on the train today, so you guys have collectively the worst and best hair in wrestling. Speaking of the best hair, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good, sir. How's everything going for you, man?
It's good. I got to spend 4 days with my mom in Oklahoma, which is, for people that don't know, my mom is the first woman to be elected to the National Wrestling Hall of Fame in the Missouri chapter. And so she went with me to that tournament, and it was just very cool kind of visiting with her in between rounds and, you know, going to the hospitality room, and went to the coaches social. And frankly, more people would rather take a picture with her and talk to her than me anyways. And you're probably on that list as well. So, but it was really fun. It was really fun and just a blessing. And the tournament was very, very smooth. So, no complaints.
Good, man.
Yeah. So did you get to watch the finals or any of it at all?
No, I wanted to get in touch with you on kind of the different pools and then how it all ended up, and then basically kind of like the highlights of, basically some of the big upsets, some of the big takeaways and things of that nature from the event. So I know that there's more than just wrestling going on during that time period. So
yeah. So let's talk about what the Hall of Fame does. Full disclosure, I'm the tournament director. Fuller disclosure. A ton of people there that made my job really easy. The Leroy Smiths, the Ed Gallegos, the Lindsey Hammers, the Jack Carnifixes, the Clay Hudsons, certainly the Ethan Kyles of the world, and a bunch of other people, even the lawyers there making sure all the contracts and everything were right. Lisa Hughes is Kale's mom, who ran the hospitality room. All the Army and the Marines that were there, all the other sponsors, Resolite got brand new mats. But basically, when you boil it down to the non-wrestling part, was this. We had a big social on Tuesday night at Eskimo Joe's, which is, I think most people know, is an iconic place there in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So very cool that Ed and the Hall of Fame did that. Wednesday was a split schedule. There were 8 teams that did round robins, 2 pools of 4, and then 8 teams, same thing. If your team was in the afternoon, your team got a privately hosted tour of the Hall of Fame. And every kid on your team got a custom backpack from one of our sponsors, and conversely in the afternoon. So when you wrestle your round robin matches, obviously at the end of the day, you got first, second, third, fourth. Multiply that by 4 pools, and you've got a gold, silver, bronze, copper pool. And so then the next day, we wrestled the semis of the 9 through 16, then the semis of the 1 through 8, then the 9 through 16 finals, and then the 1 through 8 finals. The team of the tournament, the story of the tournament was Edmond North, Oklahoma. Andy Schneider's there. David James is there. Bulu Wallen is there. Like, they got a crew. I mean, everybody talks about Stillwater. And Edmond North was ranked, I think 14, 13, 12, 15, somewhere in there. So a really good team, but they were ranked behind Stillwater, Del Barton, Poway, and Lake Highland Prep. They beat Lake Highland Prep. They beat Del Barton, and they beat Stillwater to win the tournament. And just madness, absolute madness. Also, I got to thank all the guys who were on the mic. I was able to put that crew together. So Chris Forbes, Justin Ackland, Hardell Moore, Matt Serber, excuse me, Alex Steen, Zach Randall, Jason Keck, and myself. So those guys were awesome. We kind of put them on the mats where they knew, like we put Zach Randall on Edmond North. We put Jason Keck on the Missouri schools, where they had background on the kids, but they did an awesome job. No dead air the whole time. So Edmond North beats Lake Highland Prep to win the pool, and they weren't favored to do that. Then they beat Del Barton while Stillwater beat Poway. And then the finals are unbelievable, bro. Like, it's like couple key matches. The Belford brothers both won. The one was losing to Sam Smith 7-3 and hit that little elevator, that little high leg where you step over. High leg stepped over to mount and got a fall. So he went from -3 to +6. That was a huge match. McComas and Hollingsworth had a match. It was 2-1. The only difference was a class being called, so that's when Edmund North would think they would get back. Leighton Schneider majored a guy that he probably would have teched or pinned. So there's, Edmund North left a couple points out there. And then you coach, there's always some points left out there. Either you could win by more or lose by less kind of thing, or win a match you should have, that you lost. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the last two matches. And they're down 8 points. They're down 8. And they get a major. They're down 4. And their heavyweight gets a fall. And just
Crazy.
Bonkers. And then the Hall of Fame did an unbelievable thing. There's a building called the Wes Watkins Center on OSU's campus. They hosted every single team, fed them like some awesome barbecue, nice white tablecloths, and all the kids got to listen to and get pictures with John Smith and Kendall Cross. So Coach Gable was supposed to be there. He got snowed in. I think everybody in America is aware of what's going on with the airlines and the weather right now. Oklahoma is probably the coldest I've ever been. Normally it's like 40 or 50 down there. It was 3 with wind chill going sideways. So, and we've already worked on some teams. We've gotten 3 commitments already for next year that we're super excited about, 2 top 10s and another top 25. So our goal is to make it the best dual meet tournament. And people would say in the country, I would say ever. That's our goal. Very simply. The guys got to wrestle in Gallagher. The high school coaches got to coach on the floor of Gallagher. More than one people have pointed out that that's the only arena in America named after a wrestling coach. So that was really cool. And Hardell and I got to do the semis and the finals together. That's always fun. That guy's kind of chicken soup for the soul. So it was a lot of fun, and it was really about 5 years ago where he and I first did our play-by-play ever, and we did it together at Perry. So to go back to Oklahoma was he's come a long way. I'd like to think I've come a long way. I mean, he's doing Oklahoma State now. I've had a chance to do some high-level things. So just a blessing overall. And, if you're watching this and you're the coach of a top 50 team, get at me. Get at me. We want the smoke. We want all the smoke. And the other thing is, if you're a college coach, we only had like 3 or 4 coaches. I think we're going to work with Mike Moyer next year because that's an unbelievable thing to recruit. And it's a little different than an individual tournament. Like the kids are all sitting on a bench. It's a lot easier to find them and talk to them. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So thanks for asking. Probably the upset of the week, Aaron Brooks, Marcus Coleman. And I'd like to think I'm smart about wrestling. 2 hours before you sent me that Twitter, we're sitting around at that tournament. I go, probably the biggest favorite to win nationals right now, Aaron Brooks. Literally everyone agreed, right? Like, I mean, we don't know,
Right.
Spencer, a wrestle RBY and Dayton or take down apart. 41's chaos. 49, Yanni's lost. 57's chaos. 65, you got 3 national champs. 74, Starachi's really good, but Makai's gone to overtime with them. 97's chaos, and heavyweight Schultz lost, and we don't know if Gable's coming back. AB had beaten everybody. So I felt comfortable. This is what God does to you when you get cocky.
Right.
I changed AB, but we both went to Iowa State, so maybe I put that good juju out in the universe for us. So
Right.
What were your thoughts when you saw that?
Well, that was like, I saw it on Twitter and I'm like, all right, what happened? And then I'm like, then I follow the thread and it was like a 6-point move and I'm like, whatever, like basically how does that happen? Right. Cause I mean, once again, I don't necessarily know how many times, once again, I'm just getting into the rankings and all that kind of thing, but like seeing the number ones lose mid-season as many times as this year has happened.
Yeah.
Like I haven't really been around the rankings part where like there's a lot of shifting going on, but usually like, I mean, like, world silver medalist Yanni loses, like we have, the 2 or 3-time national champion in Aaron Brooks,
who beat an Olympic bronze medalist.
Right. And then, he loses, like, reigning national champion Max Dean loses.
Colton Schultz, world medalist, loses.
Right. Like, I apologize.
You're
But yeah,
fine.
just that type of thing. It just seems to be pure pandemonium and chaos pretty much almost all over the place. Spencer Lee, whether or not he's coming back, what's going on there. Like it's just a hot topic of like at the very top of our collegiate system. I mean, other than maybe 65's a powder keg. Just none of those, none of those guys have really wrestled each other quite yet. So it's like, well, there's a few matches that are like, 4 versus 5 or whatever, but like, we'll figure that out here shortly. But, now like, who, like if you're doing your fantasy grade thing and you want to have a number one, who you taking, right?
I think it's awesome for those fantasy contests, because like a perfect example of that, and I'll go back to your point, which is awesome, is like the year that Ed Ruth lost to Gabe Dean, he was the number 2 seed and the number 2 rank at nationals, as he should have been. Gabe was the 1. We all had Ed Ruth in our pools because we're like, he's going to bonus his way to the finals and he'll probably win, which he did. And you get him for a substantial discount in those contests. So, but your point's really well taken, because like we've already had a guy lose at 41, lose at 49. Brayton Lee was at least in one pool, number 1 or poll. So lose at 57, lose at 84, lose at 97, lose at heavy. So this would have been a great bet. You go, I'll bet that 6 number 1s lose before 2023. You could have got real good money on that. Really good odds, right? I mean, and especially, I think like the people that you probably would have picked, like if you had to pick 6, I'll bet the 2 you didn't pick were Yanni and Brooks.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's just, it is pandemonium, powder keg. All those are great words for it. And if you're a fan, though, it's really fun, right? Because, every coach is like on any given day, blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of true, but it's not really true. Like if you're 5 takedowns better than me, I better reach back and do something crazy, or you might only be 2 takedowns better than me, but you're going to beat me. And, Marcus Coleman just did enough, right? Like he just didn't get thumped so that 6-point move was enough. And the other thing is that this 4-point near fall on 4 counts keeps a lot more underdogs in the match. Like, feet to back is 6 now. It's not 5, and it's 1 second less to get 1 more point. So it's really different. So, I mean, I'm sure you guys coach to that a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great equalizer. But once again, that move that Marcus Coleman hit was, Brooks had the opportunity to come back. And, Marcus wrestled a good enough match to hold on to that, because sometimes people get hit with something and it's like, it's really hard to come back from. But those guys are beasts. So,
yeah. Well, I saw Sam Smith, John's son, at National Duels. He got headlocked like in the first 25 seconds of the match. He's down 5-0 and he came back in 197. So that's a really good point. Like you can't just jump out to a lead. Like we all saw what happened with Jacob Warner at Nationals a couple years ago, where he gets headlocked. He's on his back the whole first period and chips his way all the way back and wins the match. So a lot of Heart of the Lion stories out there. We were looking for rankings. Not a lot of people have done rankings the last 2 weeks, and I don't blame them. If I was doing them, I'd want to hide under my desk too, because like you probably leave Brooks at 1. If you left Yanni at 1 when he was 0-1, you assuredly have to leave Brooks at 1. Like if you don't, then you're just not being consistent. And I'll blow a gasket on the podcast next week if that's not the case. So
there you go. Set yourself up for blow up.
Future blow up. Coming in with the heat in 2023. Okay, so I think people know this, but you're on this podcast really because of your wrestling knowledge, specifically in the international field. But one of the ways you're so well informed is because of your full-time job with Nike, with the Athlete PS, Nike Wrestling. In case people are just flipping on the first time over the holidays. So you're not just an incredibly good-looking guy with great hair. You also know some things too. By the way, beard 7 days like it was never gone. Amazing.
Yeah.
So, well done. So in regards to that, the University of Iowa made a corporate sponsorship deal with the UFC. And I talked to you about this offline. I think it's fascinating to just get your perspective, because you're a guy that helps make deals to sponsor athletes. You are the contact for most of these teams that are Nike schools. And if you look at the top 10, I'd say 8 of them are Nike schools, in any particular week. So you're talking to those coaches, you're talking to the administrations, things like that. My understanding is one of the reasons why the UFC picked Iowa over other schools is because they have a men's and a women's program. And it's also interesting to me because the 2 Division I programs I think of that have had the most athletes transition successfully to the UFC, I'll say them in alphabetical order so I don't look like a homer, is Missouri and Oklahoma State. And I have good relationships, obviously, with both schools. So when you saw the Iowa UFC deal, what did you think?
Well, I think this is a humongous corporate partnership between the worlds of MMA and wrestling. And we've been kind of like, for lack of a better term, as much as jiu-jitsu and some of the other martial arts have been feeder systems to the UFC, at one point in time, I think it was like 5 out of the 6 belt holders of the UFC were former wrestlers that were in our collegiate system and have a wrestling background.
Right.
And once again, there for a long time, if we would have included some of the other organizations such as Bellator, Strikeforce, ONE FC, all of those things, like it's loaded with guys in potential that then make that transition to MMA after their collegiate career and or after they've done an Olympic run with USA Wrestling, and then they can transition however they would like to, such as Ben Askren, Daniel Cormier, others of that, Henry Cejudo.
Right.
But I think as far as a corporate partnership between the organizations, I think that once again, as we're all wrestling fans, there's some programs that are like historically there, that have been wrestling for a very, very long time. University of Iowa being a very, very big catalyst for much of the 80s, 90s, and 70s. And then, of course, then into the 2000s. It's been there for a long time, and they've won national titles in almost every decade, right?
Yeah.
So as those things transition, I think it makes it a lot of sense for them to partner with, one of the, the oldest and greatest wrestling program historical programs. And I also think that there's, with the addition of women's wrestling being the Power 5 and, being a big Power 5 wrestling school now with both women's and men's athletics, I think it's a great way to share that lineage to wrestling, then to the UFC. So it's the first of its kind in sponsorship. So it's really hard to put anything into context because it's just never been done before.
Well, the other thing is this too: all dollars are not created equal, right? So, for example, Nike helps us with Missouri Border Brawl in a very substantial way, and we're truly, truly grateful. But if another company did exactly the same thing Nike did, it wouldn't be as good, because when I go talk to other people about sponsorships, I'm like, well, Nike believes in us. So it's hard for someone else to big time you. The UFC Iowa's levels up from my event. But if they're trying to get other big corporate sponsors or partners, they go, well, the UFC believes in us. That's kind of a big deal. A lot of kids, when they're getting recruited, eventually think they'll fight. That's like when Penn State created American Top Team out there. That's a big deal. The lineage of, like we talked about, like a Randy Couture and all the Johnny Hendrickses and all the other guys that have come through Oklahoma State now with the Nick Piccininis, the Jacoby Smiths of the world, Mizzou with Mike Chandler, Tyron Woodley, Ben Askren, a bunch of other guys, but just, people that roll right off the tongue. Iowa's I think this is a compliment. I think it's true. It's a very blue collar state. You get up, you work hard, you shovel your snow. You don't leave in the wintertime. Just a bunch of tough human beings up there. And that fits right in with MMA. I had an inkling something was going on when I was watching the Iowa State duel, and they have that banner that keeps changing in front of the scoreboard, and the UFC was on there. I'm like, they didn't give that away because that's pretty prime real estate, because it was also being, obviously live streamed on the Big Ten network. So it'll be interesting seeing more and more of these. I think the one piece of good news, well, there's multiple pieces of good news, but maybe the one piece that maybe people don't think about is if Iowa got this partnership because of women's wrestling, because they had both, that's fantastic. And if people will find out what the dollars were, and if it was substantial enough, it's a high incentive for other people to add women's wrestling. And so if they're like, well, hey, and listen, I'm just pulling a number out of the air. I have no idea. But let's say the UFC is sponsoring them at $250,000 a year, and half of that goes to the men's program and half to the women's. If you start a women's program and you called the UFC in advance and they go, we would make the same deal with you. And again, these are a bunch of hypotheticals. This is David Mirikitani's hypotheticals, not USA Wrestling's or Grant Turner's, and certainly not based on any knowledge. So I want to put 9 disclaimers on that. But if all those were true, makes it a lot easier to think about starting a program. And you mentioned it, and then I'll get out of your way. You mentioned like the number of fighters that were from wrestling backgrounds. It's going to be really, really more dominant in the next 5 years in wrestling, on the women's side, because there's that base set of skills, and there wasn't really a bunch of wrestling going on. And now that there's more and more of these programs, the only downside to college wrestling in a transition to the UFC is that it's freestyle. So there's less emphasis on holding somebody down, which is obviously important in fighting. So,
yeah.
Well,
we just haven't had the I mean, there has been some great female athletes that have come through USA Wrestling and or maybe even the collegiate stuff to go and transition to MMA. Sarah McMahon comes to the top of my list as far as like, you know, worldwide and global stardom. But yes, I mean, we're also in kind of a gold age of USA Wrestling within women's, and they're right there, about ready to win a world title, and they're really, really, really close, right? I mean, right neck and neck the past couple of years. They've been a top 5 program the entire past 2 Olympic quads, basically.
Yes.
And, you know, we'll just see what happens with, you know, some of these athletes that may transition to MMA that have had a USA Wrestling background or even that really good collegiate background within the United States. So hopefully that makes a good impact with the University of Iowa and bringing the UFC as a partner there.
Well, the one athlete that I think of, that she's posted stuff, I know she's a friend of yours, I know her a little bit, is like a Forrest Molinari, that she's talked about wanting to go to MMA. She's got a very straightforward style of wrestling. You know, that type of style, like, she's not willing to take – she's fine if you want to collar snap her so she can collar snap you. It's not identical to getting punched in the face, but that mentality is very, very conducive to being tough in fighting. I mean, when people ever ask me, how do you think so-and-so is going to do in fighting? I'm like, until they get hit in the face really hard, you just don't know. Like,
right.
you don't know. But she seems like the kind of person that would take one to give one, and, you know, very good at crowding and controlling distance. And that's another important part of fighting. So anyway, congrats to Iowa. And we talked about it briefly, but, you know, they did that training camp for a bunch of the women's world teams afterwards in Iowa City for a week. So that was very cool. Speaking of Iowa and speaking of Coralville, the Soldier Salute is up there. So let me share screen here real quick. Okay, so for people that don't know, there's 3 tournaments going on in the next 4 days. There's the Soldier Salute, there's the Midlands, and there's the Scuffle. The good news is it's a lot of wrestling to watch. The bad news is a lot of the good people are really separated. So this is on the Soldier Salute men's side. Spencer Lee is wrestling. Drake Ayala is the number 2 seed, so not a lot of depth here. The Army Kid and Yori Wolk are interesting kids to watch wrestle, but not a ton of anticipated matches here. 33. Shriver's the 1. Ibarra's the 4. Corey Land's the 3. And Jace Rhodes, I guess, is the 2. So you stop me, GT, if there's something that you're fascinated to watch. Real Woods is the 1. Caleb Gross is the 4. Sanchez is the 3. Matt Casimir is the 2. I think the big thing here is a bunch of Iowa's number 1s are wrestling, and they're trying to get in, you know, matches towards their qualifications. 49, Murin's the 1. Looks like Fangaro's the 4. Is it pronounced Rachi? Caleb Rachi?
Yeah, Rachi.
Rachi is the 3. And Anthony Echemendia, who I don't even know where he's at in school now, but he's the 2. So
I thought Echemendia was training out of like the Cyclone RTC, which is like in Ames and whatnot, because I believe he's just kind of working his way back into like wrestling. He wrestled at the Grandview Open this fall. So, I mean, he's been wrestling at some of the opens and kind of wrestling unattached. He's not affiliated with any program, but I know that those guys were kind of sitting in his corner with, I believe, his relationship to Younger and Villascusa, which he's on the coaching staff for the club.
Yeah. That Villascusa guy, by the way, is an awesome guy to talk to. Like really smart, really funny, and yeah. And awesome.
I like that side of the bracket a little bit, because Ryder Downey's a really good recruit. There was a high school kid last year that's now out, and then he'll have Enchimendia, and then Ratchian on that side. That, I mean, out of all of the brackets so far, that's kind of a one that I would pay attention to for those like 3 or 4 matches.
All right, bottom side 149 bracket. Keep an eye on it, folks. All right, 57. Jacob Wright from Wyoming is the 1. Looks like Army is 4. Cale Swenson's the 3. Cerniglia is the 2. So the interesting thing here was no Iowa guy. So so that was a little surprising. 65. Patrick Kennedy's your 1. Cole Moody's up in this bracket, so that's interesting. He's I guess Christian Minto is the 4. Looks like Jax Thompson is the 3, and Aiden Riggins, Dalton Harkins. I don't know who that is. I'm guessing Riggins is the 2. So,
and a lot of these brackets, when you go to like these opens, it's mostly just trying to separate out.
Yes.
So once again, as you figure out, like, hey, if I got 7 guys that are from the University of Iowa wrestling in this, like, let's spread them out a little bit.
Yeah, I helped see the Lindenwood Open, and that's the first thing you do, right? Like, hey, there's 4 Missouri Valley guys there. Each got to get in a quarter bracket kind of thing. So Hayden Hastings is the 1, and Brendan Swafford. Now, Swafford is unattached, but he's at Iowa, correct?
Yep.
Okay, he's the NAI transfer, right, GT?
Yeah, national champion for Graceland University, and then transferred, I believe, 2 years ago. He got some matches in some duels when Nelson was hurt,
right,
a year ago. So, okay. Yeah, University of Iowa athlete there.
There you go. Abe Assad is your 1. I'm not going to even try to pronounce his name. Adul Raza from Army. It looks like the 4. Bennett Berge, young guy, is the 3. And looks like Short from Wyoming is the 2. 97. Jacob Warner's your 1. Wyatt Volker's having a really good redshirt year, right, GT?
Yeah, he's been wrestling really, really well. So that's a good one to, kind of keep an eye on, as well as a young kid coming through, especially within this bracket. Yeah, that would be a really cool match to watch. If Wyatt and Warner get a chance to wrestle each other.
Is Volker Eric Volker's son?
No,
not related at all.
Not related.
Okay. Nick Casperson is the 3. Jake Lucas is the 2. Go to 285. This is where we need Mark. Big Tone is the 1.
Yep.
Rasmussen 4. Rosenfeld 3. Catgut 2. So not a ton of shocking things here. Let's go back and we'll share a different tab. These are the Midlands brackets. So this is interesting to me, okay? So 25, Barnett's the 1. You should get the Sheldon Seymour medley winner in the quarters. Ryan Miller's the 5. He would get Dean Peterson, who had originally committed to Princeton, is now at Rutgers. So feels like Eric Barnett's got a pretty good run, but Dean Peterson can wrestle, so that'll be interesting. Cardinal's the 3 here. Shawver's the 6. So there's 2 Rutgers kids. Blake West is the 7. Brandon Courtney is back here. So there's 2 stories here. Brandon Courtney is back, and Patrick Glory's at 133. So what would be really interesting to see is what he weighs, right? Because he can only lose 1.5% a week. So 133, exactly 1.5% of that is just shy under 2 pounds. And then it becomes a fractionally smaller number. So he couldn't make weight for 4 weeks if he weighed in at 133.0. So
I don't see him in the bracket right now at 133.
No, he's at 33. He's coming to 30.
I don't see him in the bracket at 133.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what they said. That's what Flo put out there. All right. So Lucas, here's the 33 bracket. Bird is the 1. Looks like the tournament has started. We're recording this at 10 a.m. on 12/29, so people know. Magulian is the 8. Taylor Lamont is the 5. Kolioko is the 4. Cannon is the 3. Joe Heilman is the 2. So you're right. So that whole conversation, we'll just delete it. So anyway, Taylor Lamont, Lucas Bird, Taylor Lamont, and Kolioko are really interesting matches. And it feels like I'd be very interested to know what the criteria was that Joe Heilman is seated ahead of Chris Cannon. I'm sure there's a reason, but that's kind of surprising to me. So 41. Cole Matthews is your 1. Joel Olivari is your 9. Ferranti's your 8. Zargo's your 5. Jesse Vasquez, Arizona State's here. So Jesse Vasquez had the big win over Alan Hart to win the duel. This is where he could, but he also had some puzzling losses. If he could make it out to the semis, beat Zargo, and wrestle Cole Matthews, that would be really good for him. And then on the bottom side, Frankie Talshahar, Josh Edmond is a super dangerous unseeded guy. I mean, he was a national qualifier last year from Missouri at a weight up, and he's really a 41. Brian Courtney's the 6. Caden Rooks is the 7. Alvarez is the 2. And he just looks like he just got out of round 1 in sudden victory. So what are your thoughts here, GT? This is an interesting weight class, right?
Yeah, this one's pretty interesting. And then, hey, the number 1 seed wins 4-3, and Alvarez wins in overtime. So, could get some more shakeups here as time goes on.
41 is pandemonium for sure. So 49. Parco is your 1. Johnny Lovitch, your 8. John Wiley's down to 149. That's interesting. He was a 160 last year in high school. Sam Hilligus is your 5. Graham Rooks is your 4. Zaff is your 3. For Clearance, your 6. Anthony White's your 2. 7. And Yaya is your 2. So Yaya, Parco, I don't think those guys, I can't remember now if they hit it at Vegas or not, but they were both in the same bracket. But again, this is, it's interesting because Arizona State's got one of those teams, especially if they had Teamer where, they might be the second or third best team in the country, but they've also got a duel with Cornell coming up. But if they can get this stuff locked in, that's really going to help them because the second half of the year, they don't see as many of these other schools based on their conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 57. Want to make sure we get through this because there's the middle or the scuffle is very interesting in a couple weights. Artelona, Casto, Trevor Chumbley, Garrett Modal, 65. Dean Hamidi, Justin McCoy, Peyton Hall. All right, so Quincy Monday. All right. Quincy Monday is here at 65. So, Again, this is sort of the same conversation as Glory. Monday wrestled 65 and lost a car on riding time. It feels to me like he'd be the prohibitive favorite at 57, and 65 is an absolute shark tank. But, what do you think? You think he's good enough to win 65 or maybe a little small?
No disrespect to anybody that's at 57 or 65, but both of those weight classes are stacked. You have a lot of proven talent at 65 with multiple guys that have won national titles, such as David Carr, Keegan O'Toole, and Shane Griffith.
Right.
And then at 57, I don't think that there's a ton of guys that have won national titles at that weight class.
Right.
So, I mean, if you're looking at just that statistic alone, there's 3 NCAA champions already at 165, plus countless All-Americans there.
Right.
You know, so, and once again, you know, Monday making the finals as well at 57 the year previous, I believe.
Yes.
I mean, you know, like, yeah, and once again, you never know kids' bodies, and sometimes they grow a little bit more, or they were having trouble cutting weight last year. So maybe it is the best weight class for him as an athlete. But I mean, 65 is absolutely a shark tank. You got a whole bunch of guys in there that are extremely talented, but he's going to get a shot at some of those guys. I mean, Peyton Hall's no slouch, you know, and you got Ron Nagel from Illinois at the 6th seed. So if he comes out of that side of the bracket, there's some really talented guys there. So we'll see.
I think, yeah, if he wrestled Hamidi in the finals, that'd be a really good measuring stick because Keegan O'Toole kind of pieced him up at the All-Star meet. So, I mean, you know, the transitive theory doesn't always work, but it is helpful. So 74, Edmund Ruth, Alex Kramer, Jackson Turley, Nick Incontrera, and Troy Fisher. So I saw Edmund Ruth wrestle at the Mizzou Invite. He is really pretty good. 84, Soldano is the 1. Reese Heller's the 2. 97, Braxton Amos is your 1. Max Stout is your 4. Luke Stout is your 3. Zach Bronigal is your 2. And then at 285, Colton Schultz is your 1. Trent Hilger is your 4. Slavkowski is your 3. Lucas Davison's your 2. So let's get over to the scuffle preview. I want to get everybody so they can kind of just be caught up on this. So brackets are not out. This is on Flow. If you're just listening, you can go over there. So 125, the favorites, Patrick McKee. Contenders are Trevor Mastro and Matt Ramos. Mark has been really high on Matt Ramos and been very accurate about him so far. Richie Figs is not in the bracket. Noah Certain, Steve O'Poolin, and Caleb Smith are. Their predictions are McKee, Ramos, Mastro, Poulin. We won't do picks. It'll take too long, GT, but just in general, do you agree with that, or would you mix it up a little bit?
I mean, those guys are kind of proven at that weight class. I think, you know, once again, you can interchange a lot of those guys depending upon how the matches shake out. But yeah, I don't have a problem with any of those top 4 guys.
I think Mastro needs to get a win over somebody he's not supposed to beat. Like Oklahoma State needs a couple more All-Americans. Like right now they have 2, and they don't have anybody else ranked in the top 8. And they need somebody like him to push through. Speaking of one of their All-Americans, Dayton Fix is the favorite. The only other 2 guys in the rankings are Adasayev and Aaron Nagao. Zach Redding, it says, will move back down, so he'll probably be in there. Then you have Chance Rich, Sean Carter, Kurt Phipps, Braden Palmer, Connor Brown. And they've got Fix over Nagao, Connor Brown, Adasayev. I don't know how the bracket's going to draw out. I like Adasayev a lot, but, I mean, Dayton Fix is a massive favorite here, right? GT?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think that Dayton Fix is, if not one of the top 5 pound-for-pound wrestlers that we have at the collegiate. You know, I just think he's a master at wrestling. I think he, for sure, like, probably bonuses all the way through this tournament.
Yeah, I would agree. And he's not bad at shuffleboard either. I saw him the other night while we were down there. So
yeah.
141, Andrew Lira's the favorite. Alan Hart, Jake Berglund, Dylan Drigmiller, Sleepers, Parker Phileas, Darren Miller, Mackenzie Bell, Cal Miller, my guy, and Carter Young. So some good talent here, young talent, Cal Miller, Carter Young, especially young guys. They've got it picked: Alirez, Hart, Berglund, Phileas. I'm just going to say this. I will just predict that Andrew Alirez doesn't win this weight class just because 141 has been bonkers this year. And it would make way too much sense for him to win it, right?
For sure.
For sure. So, all right, let's get to the middleweight one here. Okay. So this is 49, 57, 65. 149, Paniro, David Mirikitani's guy, Johnson is your favorite. Okay. contenders, John Miller, Brock Mahler. Hopefully those guys will wrestle in the semis. That'd be awesome. Ethan Miller, Noah Castillo. Ethan Miller's the only loss was to Brock Mahler. And they've got it predicted. And then I guess Caleb Henson must be wrestling in here if they've got him predicted to place fourth. So let me ask you this. If Milner wrestles Mahler, GT, who do you think? What do you think there?
I mean, that's a great match. I'd definitely pay to watch that one for sure. But I think Mahler is really stingy, but Milner's got kind of an X factor where he can go and get some points. So, I mean, if I had to put money on it, I'd probably take Mahler, but I wouldn't be surprised if Milner wins.
And this match is important because, you know, without looking at all these guys' schedule, like Mahler still will wrestle Pinheiro in the duel and in the Big 12, and Milner has the SoCon schedule, so he won't have as many ranked guys. So that head-to-head stuff, and then the, you know, if you beat me and I beat somebody else, then that's kind of how we do it, kind of ranking thing. So very important match for seeding at Nationals. 57, Kendall Coleman, Jared Franek. Then you got G, Brayton Lee, Jared J. Cuse. G is trying to become the first 3-time Southern Scuffle champion at 3 different weights. That's fascinating. He beat Brayton Lee 2-0 earlier in the duel. Daniel Cardenas, Stanford sleeper, won the Doc B. They've got it picked here. Franek, Lee, G, Coleman. This is the way to the tournament, folks, right here, 165. As Grant alluded to, Keegan O'Toole, Shane Griffith, David Carr. 3 natty champs. 3 guys undefeated this year. Then you got Wyatt Sheets, Caliendo, and Sparks. They've picked Carr to win the tournament. Let me just start with O'Toole will probably be, and deservedly so, the 1 seed. Who do you got, Carr, Griffith?
Ooh.
This is how good of a friend I am. Whichever side you take, I'll take the other side for wins.
Oh, thanks, bud. Like, I mean, you got 1, 2, and 3 in the country right now. I mean, I'll take Carr over Griffith, but I think, you know, with O'Toole, like O'Toole does a lot of different things that David doesn't do, like with more of the cradles and the scrambles and things.
Yeah.
So, have they ever wrestled each other collegiately?
No. I'm almost positive no, and they're friends. Nate Cartino told me they're friends.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah. And then would you pick, but you did a really good job. Oh, you took David Carr. Sorry.
I put David Carr over Griffith. And then the first time ever meeting between Carr and O'Toole, I wouldn't be shocked if O'Toole gets like a cradle on him, like off of one of his shots. But once again, I don't necessarily know if he gets it, but maybe he secures a takedown. But I definitely think that's like a go all the way to the 3rd period type match.
Yeah, this is sort of must watch TV January 2 if you're anywhere near a phone or computer or laptop. So let's get to the upperweight preview. 74, Dustin Plott, Peyton Mako. Huge match here. So this is really important because Plott has a path to go undefeated this year. He won't see Mackay and he won't see Starachi. And if he goes undefeated, he'll have obviously tied for the best winning percentage with anybody, and he would be a conference champion. Peyton Mako's wrestled him really close. He wrestled him close in the duel. He wrestled him really close in the Big 12 finals. So, and he also wrestled Mackay super close just a week or 2 ago. Bunch of contenders here: O'Reilly, Eichens, Rocky J, Solis, and Broderson. But I mean, this is really a 2-horse race unless something goofy happens in the final till the finals, right?
Yeah.
And I assume we're picking Plott, but I mean, I think if you set the number on this, it's like 1.5 is the point spread, right?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, once again, if anything goes funky or if whenever that match with Plott and Mako happens, like, I mean, once again, we're talking about 2 top 10 guys there.
And Mako does that lefty high crotch, which are not, I mean, Plot's felt it now, but it's hard to get used to. And he's good in those cradles too. I mean, he's a Wisconsin guy, and obviously probably works out with Keegan a ton, I would guess. So it'd be fun to watch. 184, Marcus Coleman is your favorite. And you got Salazar, Whitlake, Harmon, Nolan, Waddell. So Whitlake lost to Salazar in the duel, I'm guessing, must have for this to be seeded this way. I just know they lost that duel. Salazar defeated Whitlake earlier in December, 4-0. So Whitlake needs this win because the Big 12 is not super salty at 84 besides him and Coleman. So you got Demetrius Romero, but he could – I mean, this is a chance for Whitlake to get in the top 10, and this is another guy that Oklahoma State – right now they got in the rankings, they got 5 guys scheduled to lose in the round of 12, and they got to punch some guys through. So if you've seen Whitlake wrestle at all, GT, and if so, like, do you feel like he's big enough for this transition? Because he literally bumped up 19 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, this will be a great telling big-time tournament for Whitlake at that weight class because there are some hitters at there. So I want to see him wrestle some of those guys and see how big and, like, strong he can look against them.
Right. And he's not tall. That's the other thing, right? Like, he's not tall for the weight. So, that's where, distance control is an issue. So this might be my other favorite weight. Rocky Elam, Ethan Laird, Younger Bastida. So Rocky's the number 1. Laird, I'm guessing they have him at number 2. I'm guessing Bastida would be seeded 2, but I don't know that. And based on being an All-American last year, and he placed behind Rocky at Nationals, even though he beat him in the duel. So 2-3 don't really matter that much. So, they wrestle each other. It only matters if you wrestle the 6 or the 7. The other guys in this bracket, Jackson Smith, who's really fun to watch, Louis Dupre, Owen Pence. Then you got Luke Serber. By the way, have you met Luke Serber's dad, GT?
No.
All right. Whenever you're bored, just Google Matt Serber. He literally looks like he could walk right on the lot and do commercials for like Skoll, Copenhagen, any beer, any line of cowboy boots or hats, like just the perfect walk, just built like literally like a cowboy. Couldn't be a nicer guy. Him and Hardell are buddies. But, we were teasing him about his son, like, trying to do more exciting things in life. So, and did a great job on the play-by-play. But he was also the coach at Tuttle for years and turned that place into a freaking dynasty. So it was fun to watch him do the commentary on the Tuttle duels. So anyway, TJ Stewart, the 2 freshmen will be here. So that'll be fun to watch. And it looks like they've got it predicted. I don't know why they don't have Bastida.
I think they probably left him out there. That doesn't make any sense.
They must have either forgot him or think he's not wrestling, right?
Very well.
Yeah, okay. Then at heavyweight, Zach Elam, Sam Schuyler. Then Jaron Smith, Niesenbaum. I mean, I think the main weights, I'm going to get out of here. The main weights to really, you got to watch 65 and 97 at Scuffle, right? Like just top-end talent. 49's interesting in the semis. Midlands used to be the tournament for years. Then Scuffle came around, and now the Soldier Salute. And so there's more dilution. Less people are going to hit each other heads up, but probably good for the sport. More kids are wrestling. So, and more kids will, get D1 matches. Last thing for me, then I'll leave it over to you, is I'm literally getting in the car shortly after this, going down to the Wonder Woman tournament. 688 high school girls wrestling, GT. Pretty awesome. My guy, Mike Wakeham, is the tournament director, kind enough to let me be on the mic. I helped make the arrangements with Flow Wrestling, so that'll be exciting. I think the tournament's going to move to St. Louis next year. You might need to send a Grandview representative down there to recruit that thing because there's a ton of hammers in there, like Ava Ward and Angelina Vargas are in the same bracket, and both Fargo top 4 All-Americans. So it's not just quantity. They're starting to get some good quality. And when you're recruiting, that's what you're looking for, is that cream of the crop. So This will be the last time we're on the air in 2022. Just want to thank USA Wrestling. Thank specifically Gary, but Rich, who trusted us. I know we said this before Christmas. Want to thank Mark. That's been my ride or die from the beginning. Want to thank you. The podcast is so much better because you're a part of it. And I will give the final word to you, sir.
Great 2022. Looking forward to an amazing 2023. Once again, thank you everybody for watching, listening, and downloading our pod. Looking forward to an amazing time for 2023, and probably could be one of the craziest NCAA wrestling tournaments here in a couple of months. So stay tuned as these tournaments are going on, and be sure to watch, listen, and follow.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. See you all next week.